Okay, so what did I do in part one of this video series that was different than every other video I've ever produced on this channel? And that is I recorded the entire audio on the inbuilt microphones of my camera. And so in this video, I want to give you all of my tips on tricks and techniques that you can implement when you use the inbuilt microphones of your camera to get the best audio quality. And so, um, yeah, I don't know. I would tell you how many there are, but I don't know. I didn't get that far in counting. So let's just go straight from the top. Before you even turn on your camera to start recording, the first thing is to learn where your microphones are. And so built-in microphones on cameras are located all over the body, right? In different places. And sometimes they are obvious, like on Sony's vlogging cameras, like the ZV E1 or ZV1, ZV1 or ZV-E10, where that top plate that comes with the wind muff obviously is the microphone. But sometimes on other older cameras, they are just three little holes that are the mic. And sometimes on newer cameras, they have multiple microphones to be able to implement certain things like wind reduction and stereo signals. And so the first thing you want to do is to make sure you know where the physical location of the microphones are on your camera, because the last thing you want to do while holding your camera is to place a finger over one of those openings, rub your camera, get some, handling noise that will definitely ruin recordings. So if you don't use a tripod, if you're just running around hand holding your camera, because I'm kind of feeling like I would do that with this one. I'm recording on the Action 4, by the way. Make sure you know where the microphones are so that you don't obstruct any of them. Second, when you turn on your camera, if there is some kind of manual setting or pro mode, go into that and learn all of the different functions that your camera might have when it comes to audio. And that will help you, I think, dial in the best sound for your given use case scenario. I think by default, most cameras come by in their automatic, fully auto settings, and that goes for the image as well as the audio. And while that might work in some cases, you're not going to get the most out of your equipment if you just leave it in auto, because sometimes there are things that are enabled that you don't necessarily want or need, like wind reduction. If you're shooting indoors, you can definitely turn that off, because that's something that will affect the quality of your audio. But if you're not in a windy condition, yeah, you definitely don't need it. But oftentimes that comes with default on. Other times there are low cut filters, or otherwise known as high pass filters, that are enabled that maybe you want to turn off because they reduce low end rumble, or reduce noise, which is sometimes what they call them in consumer cameras. So having a good understanding of all of the features of your camera with regards to audio will help you dial in the best settings for you and however you're using it. Third, understand the polar pattern or the pickup pattern of the mics of your camera. So cameras all have different kinds of polar patterns or pickup patterns when it comes to where they're sensitive for audio. The majority of them are sensitive from the front, but a lot of times those microphones are omnidirectional, meaning that they will pick up sound in all directions equally. But oftentimes they reject sound from the back. You've watched videos where people are talking to the camera, they're holding it, and then they flip it around to show you something, and they're narrating from the back, and it sounds all muffled. That's because on that specific camera, the lobe of sensitivity is in the front and not so much in the rear. Whereas other times there are cameras where they kind of pick up sound from all directions. And so having a good understanding of how your specific camera picks up sound, and you can do that by turning it on, hitting record, and literally walking around your camera in different places, at different angles, at different distances, to get a sense of how your camera, what your camera hears, as opposed to what you normally hear, on the other side of it. So now that we've gotten all those things ready, The third thing that we can do to maximize the built-in microphones of your camera, or maybe it's the fourth thing, I think it's the fourth thing we can do, is to get closer. And we get closer by shooting in as wide a field of view as we possibly can. So one of the best ways and easiest ways to get better audio is to get physically closer to your microphones. And that holds true for lavs, that holds true for shotguns, that holds true for condensers and dynamics, and for the built-in microphones of your camera. And so the closer that we can get to the camera, the better the audio will sound. Technically, better the signal-to-noise ratio that you are producing. And so getting closer, though, means that we want to shoot as wide as possible because we don't want to get too close to our image, right? Like I could get right up in here, and I could bring my volume down, and this probably sounds really nice, but I am literally like a hang 10 distance away from my camera, and that might be like a little too close, a little closer than I feel comfortable with. And so, looking at my camera, figuring out where you are in relation to your microphone and lens distance-wise and trying to close that gap can really help you get better sounding audio almost immediately without having to do anything else. And maybe one of the final tips, I don't know if it's the final tip or not, but if you go outside, make sure you use some kind of wind protection. And I know that can be hard because sometimes larger mirrorless or DSLR cameras don't have built-in, wind muffs like some newer cameras, some vlogging style cameras might. So things like the Sony ZV-E10 or Sony ZV-1 has those slide-on wind muffs. Other times, if you vlog with an action camera and you're outside, you can get like a wind slayer, a foam enclosure that can help reduce wind noise. Or you could potentially turn on wind reduction if your camera has that feature. But wind noise is something that can totally ruin a good recording. And even if you're far away, even if you don't implement any of those other things, wind noise is definitely something that can just make your video unwatchable or your audio unlistenable. Unlistenable? Yeah, I think so. And so make sure if you go outside to protect your microphones and your camera from the wind. And that could also be as simple as if you're holding your camera, make sure you hold your hand and block the wind. Because if you're doing something like vlogging with an action camera, that is a feasible thing to do. Or move your camera away if you feel wind coming on you, right? Positioning is critical when it comes to minimizing wind noise without any protection. And now maybe this is the last thing that you can do. Don't be afraid in post-production to add processing. And that's something that I don't normally recommend or advocate for a lot of post-processing in my editing phase. But sometimes the built-in microphones have a little bit of extra noise behind them. And so taking a little bit of noise reduction can help take that away ever so slightly and just clean up your audio a little bit. You don't have to go overboard with EQ and compression and declicking, but just a little bit of noise reduction can take the edge off of those built-in mics that sometimes sound a little noisy. So those are all of my tips. If you have your own tip for recording audio in camera, drop it down in the comments below because I'm sure that someone else will find that helpful. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk again real soon.